This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
It is commonly said that memories in the Middle East are long, that although the Crusades may have been forgotten in the West, they were still vividly remembered where they happened. This is false. The simple fact is that the Crusades were virtually unknown in the Muslim world, even a century ago. The term for the Crusades, Harb al-Salib, was only introduced into the Arab language in the mid-19th century. The first Arabic history of the Crusades was not written until 1899. Westerners may be surprised to learn that Muslims in the Middle East have only recently learned of the Crusades. How, one might ask, is that possible? How could they not remember centuries of Christian holy wars waged against them? It must be remembered that although the Crusades were of monumental importance to Europeans, they were a very minor, largely insignificant thing to the Muslim world. Traditionally, Muslims took very little interest in people or events outside of the Dar Islam. There was, therefore, nothing to differentiate the Crusades from any other wars fought against infidels. The Crusades were, in any case, unsuccessful, and thus irrelevant. A Western traveler in the 18th century would have been hard-pressed to find a Muslim in the Middle East who had heard of the Crusades. Even in the 19th century, they were known only to a handful of intellectuals. In the grand sweep of Islamic history, the Crusades simply did not matter. Muslim perceptions of their own history changed in the 20th century. Rescued from obscurity, the Crusades were discovered and given a place of importance that they had never enjoyed before. The long memory of the Crusades in the Muslim world is, in fact, a constructed memory, one in which the memory is much younger than the event itself. How did this come about? As we have seen, when European colonial powers took control of the Middle East in the wake of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they brought with them a concept of the Crusades and an understanding of their own actions within that medieval context. In books and colonial schools, European colonists taught the Muslim world about the Crusades. They were vividly described as heroic enterprises whose aim, like those of the colonialists, was to bring civilization to the Middle East. It was also at this time that Muslims were reintroduced to Saladin. Hard as it may be to believe, Saladin was virtually forgotten in the Middle East. On further reflection, though, that should not be too surprising. Saladin was a Kurd, an ethnic group not well liked by either Arabs or Turks. Although he had won the Battle of Hattin in 1187 and subsequently conquered Jerusalem and much of the Crusader kingdom, Saladin's successes as well as his dynasty were short-lived. The Third Crusade managed to erase most of his conquests. Even Jerusalem would not remain permanently in Muslim hands. The great hero of Arab folk literature was not Saladin, but Baybars. The latter had led his Mamluk slave army first to crush the Mongol invasion, and then to eradicate the Latin Christian presence in Syria and Palestine. His victories were far more long-lasting, and so were celebrated for centuries. Indeed, are still celebrated today. Saladin may have been forgotten in the Middle East, but he was very well remembered in Western Europe. In part, this was because his manners and actions seemed to have much in common with the chivalric knight. There is no doubt that Richard the Lionheart thought highly of Saladin. This made him a perfect foil for the celebrated Crusader king, and he therefore figured prominently in medieval romances. In time, storytellers would have Saladin being knighted and even secretly converting to Christianity.